for tuning in to yet another episode in which I talk about issues related to public transport. Now, you can see already right in front of you that the rack looks very different. This is because I have a new computer, which means that instead of having a computer that is far too old and has a screen that needs to be at a specific angle, I have something new where I only have installed the most basic things. But we will live for now. So our topic for today is just Q&A. Now, in the event there's no Q&A, I do have a blog post that I thought was my most recent, but it was actually my second most recent because I did write a little bit about LA in between, in which I finally went and updated my New York crayon. I feel like I need to explain things just because maybe it's a new computer, so I'm feeling like it's new stream, but it isn't. So crayon, for people who don't know, so this is a map of subway lines that I drew that I think New York needs to be building. Let's do the high-res version. Of note, everything is on my old computer, and therefore I do not have any of the files on this one, but that is fine because I uploaded them and I'm not going to make changes mid video. But anyway, so if you recognize the New York City subway map, you will recognize that I'm using vaguely the existing colors. Maybe some changes, like this is normally green, this is the 5 line, and I'm asserting that they should go as a branch of the 2. It's called de-interlining. But the point is that I'm adding more lines, right? So I'm saying, for example, that they should be extending the 6th train, which currently ends at Pelham Bay Park. These are the names of the stations. They're on a different layer, so they don't. So this is why they're essentially part of the map layer, and they're not part of what I drew. I never write station names. Just show where the stations are. So 6th train goes up until here, and I'm asserting that they should build an extension along this alignment to Co-op City and a little bit beyond. It is called 6 to Co-op City, and I'm asserting that, okay, this is 4.7 kilometers. Most of this should be above ground, just because the 6 is above ground here. All of this is a freeway. It's part of the throughway, and this is a very wide road delineating the eastern end of Co-op City. I'm not saying that the line should go through the middle of the project, although honestly, that might be an alternative. A little shorter but more underground. And then here they can tunnel. So 4.7 kilometers, and my assertion is that if New York costs were normal, this would cost $600 million. New York costs are of course not normal by a factor of 10. Which, just being a new computer, you can't even see the database, so I'm just going to tell you to go on transitcosts.com. So it's called crayon because it's like I'm drawing colored lines on a map as if it's with like lots of colored crayons. So this is the green crayon. Here I'm saying that the E train from Jamaica Center should be extended east to Cambria Heights, so that's blue. Right now this is an orange train up to Jamaica 179th. And again, one of the de-interlining assertions is that this should be moved around so it goes to 8th Avenue and is therefore blue, but again, extended on Hillside. This is why it's called crayon. It's a derogatory and affectionate name from the London Reconnections blog. Okay. Let's take... okay, can you tell me more about the LA Regional Connector if you have any cool stories, because all I know is that it exists and I do not know what it is like to ride it. I have not been in LA in a long time. When was the last time I was in LA? 16. I was in LA in 2016. Yeah, visiting a friend who I have not seen in a cool more than 5 years. No. Yeah, 5 years. So, question about the tram network. Okay, so what is your question about the tram network? So speaking of, so about the overlaps, I will say that there's a method to the madness. The method to the okay. So I'm assuming you're asking about Grand Concourse because that's the most blatant one. So the tram network is not really based on complementing the subway. It partly is, but most of the lines, and this includes the entire Bronx network, these lines are not based on how to what's it called? How to called oh, okay. Seats are kind of flat. The trains on each line run every 10 minutes. Ugh, that's terrible. Yeah, when I was writing my most recent blog post, I was talking about this. Yeah, yeah, the part where the isn't there don't the isn't there a section where the blue and Expo line, I guess they're called A and E now, share tracks at grade, which is really sus for a Stadtbahn. Like usually you want the Stadtbahn. What I actually want is for my other computer from the side not to make Mastodon noises. Like Mastodon noises are great, but not when I'm streaming. Mastodon is great. Those of you who are not on Mastodon, please join the Fediverse. Pick an instance and go with it. If you want to join mine, I will send invites. Anyway, so okay, so I can see junctions being I can see the junction being flat actually, just because there's a lot of sight running. So for example, the Boston Green Line, the junctions there are flat. It's done by sight. But all of the segments that are actually at grade are are branch, not trunk, and I believe that is also true of, I don't know if literally every German Stadtbahn, but the ones that I looked at. So there might be but it's kind of weird that LA doesn't do it that way. Anyway, okay, so tell me about Grand Concourse and now QB and Flatbush. Okay, so let me go back to this. As I said, the trams are not mostly about complementing the subway; they're mostly about replacing the buses. Which means that for figuring out where the trams go, I mostly just went with where the main buses are. Now, I'm sensitive to things like changes in the subway, changes in commuter rail. So if I'm asserting that there should be a subway extension somewhere, I'm probably not going to put a tram there. For example, Hillside is actually a pretty busy bus corridor. So the bus behavior in Eastern Queens is really frustrating because it's mostly just rush hour to the subway. In the Queens bus redesign, they're called rush routes. However, when the lines are farther from the subway, I put them in if there was a very busy bus, like here on Union Turnpike. Now, I'm open to the assertion. I'm open to the argument that if there's a subway here, then instead of having a tramway here, you should instead have frequent buses here. I mean, keep the trams here and here. But that gets me back to Grand Concourse, which is the most blatant one. The subway here already exists, and yet the buses that run on the concourse BX1, BX2, that might actually be a top 10 route citywide. Okay, impressive. I actually managed to type. Okay, I obviously would not want 2021, and the reason is that I would want things that are pre-corona, because I'm an optimist about post-corona bounce back, for the record. So these are the busiest routes. Yeah, it's top 10 route. Number 8. It's called 1 and 2. Sometimes they lump two routes if they run together. There's only and they only differ on some outer branching, which is true of BX1 and 2. And so obviously, if there's a really busy bus, I would put a subway there and the crayon. So this is First and Second Avenues. Second Avenue subway has partly been built, but only partly, and this is why the map has it might not be clear with the colors. So this exists, phase 1, and this I'm proposing phase 2. I shouldn't say I'm proposing. I mean, it's under construction. I think engineering and not physical construction, but it's under construction. It's going to happen. I don't even think it's terrible at the current costs. Remember how I mentioned 10 times? So phase 2, I'm saying 5 kilometers because I'm including Crosstown under 125th, and they're not building that. They're only building up until here. This is something that a lot of planners like, but it's not in the program. So they're not building 5, they're building 3, and they're not building it for 1.5, they're building it for 6. Or 7 maybe. When I said they're building it's far too expensive, I mean it. And somehow, at 7 billion, it's marginally a good idea. If it's that or nothing, it's marginally a good idea to build that. Obviously, make whatever effort you can to make it not 7, but probably 800, 900, and then altogether it would be 1.5. But this is such a strong corridor. Again, I don't need to tell the city this. And again, the bus here, top route in the city. And so, but the concourse route is strong even with the subway existing. So I'm respecting that and putting a tram. And you said about Queens Boulevard and Flatbush. Queens Boulevard, there isn't a very strong bus here, but there are some buses that partly connect there. So essentially it's just connecting the buses to each other. So really the part that I intended to do was this, which isn't exactly a bus route because the buses don't go on because local buses don't go on expressways, but there's a meandering bus roughly along this alignment that's pretty strong. And then there's Woodhaven and connects to Woodhaven, and then maybe you want something along the middle part of Queens Boulevard. This route on Flushing, not Flushing neighborhood, Flushing Avenue is a pretty strong bus. Not top, but decently strong. So once they get almost there, you might as well start connecting them. I mean, most likely. So the thing is, probably it's going to be median tracks for this. So you're taking lanes anyway. So you're taking lanes for most of the road. Might as well keep that for, let's say, connecting the lines to each other for repositioning, and then might as well just keep them. Is the reasoning. Okay. And Flatbush. I should probably get back to before I close this topic. Flatbush. The thing is, so really strong buses. So the top route in Brooklyn is the B46, which is Utica. So strong that it should be a subway. And again, it's not just me saying that. It has always been the route to build after Second Avenue subway is completed, going back to 1950s planning. Nostrand, same thing. It's, I think, the second or third strongest bus in Brooklyn. Again, top 10 citywide, the B44. Yeah, number 3 in Brooklyn, number 5 citywide. B6 and B82 are two buses that kind of go like this. Not quite, they go from Coney Island. It's via 2 different routes. This rationalizes them. And essentially, this is B35, also very strong, just maybe not top 10 now. So the point is, so B41 is this, and this is also a very strong route. I think it's maybe number 15 citywide. So again, it's something that I would probably deprecate because new subways. However, there's a little gizmo that I'm doing here, which is called a subway surface line, except not subway, which is what I said before about the Boston Green Line or German Stadtbahns, where the city center section is in tunnel and then it branches in streetcar mode. There used to be trains there. Now, I'm told in comments that the loading is problematic and it's been rebuilt, but there used to be trains there. Elevated trains and also streetcars. So put streetcars back where the elevated trains were. Rebuild this terminal. And it used to be called, it's called Park Row, and as an elevated terminal, it was very busy before the subway was built and kind of took away all the traffic. So you build that, and then you build an L here for streetcars, and then you branch them on the surface to Flushing, Flatbush, and then a route to Red Hook, which doesn't have really good bus ridership just because the exact routings there kind of suck. So that's the duplication. If that makes sense. Okay, more questions. Do I think that a trolley bus is a worthy replacement for a busway? So a trolley bus and a busway are two completely independent things. A busway is a piece of infrastructure where the buses are separated from other traffic. A trolley bus is also a piece of infrastructure where the bus gets powered by overhead wires. In theory, you can do them together. I mean, what do I mean in theory? You can do them together. However, it's not. They're not as intertwined as you might think. The issue is that buses are always flexible a little bit with the trolleys. They can go, for example, when I lived in Vancouver, this is where I'm going to use Google Earth here. So when I lived in Vancouver, my commute was a bus. The reason is that I don't know if they're showing if we can do line shape. Do you have layers? Okay, I'm not saying layers, so I will just tell you verbally. Downtown Vancouver, you might be able to tell by building shape. 3 main metro lines, which are driverless light metro, to the point that some people identify it as light rail, including a singer who I like who used to live here, and I think might still live here, actually, called Hop a Plane. I took a train back where my car from, and literally she referred to it as light rail in a show. So this is one line with a kind of weird line through downtown, and then it goes through kind of this gash, if you can see it. This right of way up to Surrey. It's called the Expo line with a branch going up until I think around here. It's called the Lougheed Mall, this area. Line number 2 is the third to have been built, goes on a more straight alignment underneath Canby, north-south, and then goes to branches to the airport and to Richmond. Third line, second chronologically to have been built, the Millennium Line, and it was built alongside this branch like this. At this point, it goes from Coquitlam, or maybe this alignment, and then I think this is where it goes. And it goes east-west up until here, this kind of yard, with extension up until here. No UBC. There are plans to extend this to UBC, however, due to high construction costs, they only have money to build half that extension to about here. This means that people commuting to UBC now and in the next, hopefully just in years, maybe longer, can only take the bus. Now, the way the buses work in Vancouver is, okay, so the buses that are sufficiently old, which means early they go downtown or near downtown, are trolleys, and if there's a local bus and a rapid bus, then the local gets a trolley and the rapid is diesel. So actually the busiest bus in Vancouver is a diesel because it's the rapid on Broadway. But the local on Broadway is a trolley. The local on 4th Ave, which is what I took, is a trolley. Express again is a diesel. Should call it Express. Rapid is a diesel. In America, this is a weird American bus plannerism that Jared Walker drilled me on 14 years ago. In bus terminology, if it skips stops but makes regular stops every kilometer or something, it's called rapid or limited. Express bus in American, and I guess also Canadian terminology, is reserved for a bus that makes a few stops in the suburb and then expresses over a very long stretch on a freeway. So it's kind of a freeway commuter bus, and these are not what I'm talking about. So the point is, I did take trolleys, and the trolleys can maneuver around obstacles. So busways are nice for trolleys, but they don't have to come for trolleys. And I actually don't think that it's very common to have busways on trolleys, which I just think is a tradition. It's very rare to build new trolleys, as far as I know. Now, I say as far as I know because, as I understand it, the largest trolley network is in Shanghai, and I don't know what they're doing with it. So the trolleys that I'm familiar with are European, mostly Central European. So a few German cities have them, a bunch of Swiss cities. So some, I don't know what to call them, Western, Eastern European cities, like Prague. And mostly they're just working with the wire they have. They do extensions, but it's very rare. So it's mostly just inherited networks. And at this point, they have battery trolleys. So it's not full battery buses, which are just a normal bus just powered by a battery, but they're battery trolleys, so the range is only a couple kilometers off wire. So the battery can be much smaller, the bus can be much cheaper and more reliable. Overhead operation being much more reliable than batteries. But so instead they make the buses go off wire a little bit. So busways, conversely, are a new phenomenon, or rather, specially designed ones, as opposed to maybe a streetcar tunnel that became a bus tunnel, which is something that does exist in Providence. So technically, Providence has the first BRT in America, possibly the world, because it's a streetcar tunnel that was converted to a bus tunnel in, I think, 49. Oh, wow. The fact that I'm typing and I'm not making any typos does make me feel, 48. But so something that's dedicated as a busway for buses around modernizing buses is much newer. I think the first proper example of this is the Curitiba BRT, which I think was 89 maybe. So it's a different era. Now, could these be combined? Yes, absolutely. However, usually the people who build BRT are so in love with buses as opposed to anything with fixed infrastructure like trains or anything that reminds them of trains, that they are against trolleys. And it's actually really tragic because in Boston, the outfit that pushes BRT the hardest, the Bauer Foundation, got the idea that it should be unwired because wire is a different technology to them. And so they actually supported the removal of the trolley wires and thus the de-electrification. So yes, these can be combined. I think it would be interesting to do this. However, in practice, it's not, just because of historic reasons. Okay. As a replacement for Flatbush, run the trams onto Franklin. I don't know. I kind of like Franklin as rapid transit. I mean, the trains. I mean, why would you even tram it? I mean, the one-seat ride, I don't think it's that important because the one-seat ride mostly wants to hit downtown Brooklyn or Manhattan. What else? And I mean, the connecting passengers are going to connect either way. The first opportunity. What else? So this is the shuttle. It's kind of weird. You can do smaller vehicles with higher frequencies, but this already has small vehicles. I think it's two car trains. So there are on-street tramways that are longer than this because two-car trains. I don't know if it's two-car 60-footers or 75-footers. So I don't know if it's 36 meters total or 46, but 45-meter tramways. I mean, articulated, but 45-meter things that run on streets are pretty common. So I don't. So you're not really gaining anything from turning it into a tram, from making it a tram. What else? Oh, what's up with the 86th Street streetcar? Oh, yeah, you're right. This is actually something that This is something. So the history of this map is that it had been sitting on my computer for a very long time. I would show you the history, except that, as I mentioned, it is not on this computer. But this is something I've been working on for many years. I even have a post called Assumed Nordic Costs, which is very clearly the same, I mean, an older version of the map, but it's the same file, which I made years ago with cost per kilometer that are about half what is here, because the Nordic costs of the early 2010s in early 2010s dollars were about half what the Nordic costs are today in early 2020s dollars. Some of that is inflation, some of it is a massive, truly massive cost overrun, which we do talk about in our report. So this, you look at cases, you look at the Sweden case. We don't talk that much about the cost overrun in the sense that they promised that the cost would be something and they're delivering it to, I think, 50% higher real cost. Rather, it's that all of the costs are rising. So yes, the costs, so what I mean is that the cost of actual projects that were completed in the Nordic countries 10, 15 years ago were that, and the cost of projects that are being completed in the Nordic countries now are higher. It's not that they promised X and are delivering Y. They used to deliver X, And now, unfortunately, they are delivering Y, and Y is a higher cost. But anyway, so while working on this file, again, I did some tweaks from the previous map. I will answer why I made these tweaks if people care. This is something that I added maybe 20 minutes, no, not 20 minutes, while writing the blog post 2 days ago. This is something that I added at the very end when I was trying to figure out, okay, what should be on the map. It's 14th and 86th. These are very busy buses. 14th, I think, is top 10, right? Yeah, 14th is number 6. It actually has 2 branches, so 2/3 of the buses do this. The other third go on Avenue A here. I can see a world in which it should just consolidate to Avenue C, or they could keep Avenue D. It's mostly for the connection to these projects, and then there should be an entrance to this to the subway station to be built at D as well as C. 86 is not top 10, but I think it's top 20. These two are the busiest bus routes in North America per kilometer of length. They're very short, is the point. And construction costs are based on length. Fare revenues are not. Ridership in general is not. So it's useful to build routes that are very high ridership per kilometer is why I'm doing this. And I recognize it actually might be a little problematic because it's not, so everything else is a single connected network. Which again explains some of the weirder things, like some completionism on Queens Boulevard, where I don't actually expect people to ride on this section very much. Maybe if they're on Union Trip again, they're going here or something like that. But everything is connected, actually. So you build the stabling yard wherever you want, wherever there's space, and then you can. I mean, you might want more than one because you don't want to. Because it's going to be literally hours to get from, let's say, southern Brooklyn along all these lines to the North Bronx. But you build sites and you can move things between them, and then the Manhattan sites, not the ones that go Stadtbahn on the Brooklyn Bridge, or the other two are disconnected. So that would be weird. I still think they should be built. They could be something weird like doing a connection that's not ever in service on East End that somehow loops to this terminal. This would be underground mostly, but most of the underground bit here exists to be a short extension. So no, it's not the car. No, the car. That's not going to help you. The loading, at least per Stephen Bowen, is based on ridership. It's not ridership. It's based on weight per unit length. So it's not how much stuff there is on the bridge at a given time, or the dynamic loading is how much stuff there is on a few meters of the bridge at once. Which I don't think is a problem based on what he said. I think he said 10,000 pounds per foot, maybe, which is what 4.5 kilometer, not kilometer, 4.5 metric tons per foot, which is per meter about 15 tons, which is still fine. Oh, an extension on. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, definitely. Yes. So bear in mind, all of these are very busy buses. So these two, I don't remember in which order, are the two busiest buses in North America per kilometer. Now, 125th does not have a bus. 125th has 4 buses, which go, I think there's one that goes Morningside Heights, 125th, across the bridge to the airport, the M60. That's the one that they've turned into SPS. It's also considered the whitest route because white people airport. It's not predominantly white or anything, but whiter than the rest. There's what, 3rd Ave, there's this, and then Lex, and 3rd, and then there is, I think, Upper Broadway to this, something like that. So anyway, 4 routes. If you try to do something weird, like take each of the 4 routes individually, divide its ridership by its length, you're not going to get huge numbers because it's routes that are medium strength, not top or anything. And then and they're not very short. But when you add these four numbers just to see what happens on 125th, this is actually a very high number. I think might actually even beat 86 and 14th. So yeah, so this is why this should be built as a subway. It also is a natural extension of Second Avenue. Does this steal this? Yeah, maybe, but I'm not sure. Certainly not. It does. It would not at all interact with us. This is this is too far south. There's already the L train. Again, because it's not paralleling a subway line that I think should be built, but a subway line that already exists. We can recognize that there's so much demand even for a bus because there's such a thing even on top of the subway. And it's not like you can improve the subway to obviate the bus, because what can you do? I mean, they have integrated fares, so it's not about fare problems like with commuter rail. The L train, yes, I think it should be extended here, but that's not going to make a difference. Like I'm pretty sure that people who go from here, I'm pretty sure people who go from like this area, maybe not from here because I need bus a little bit. People who go from like the East Village to 8th Ave and 14th will just walk to the L. So it's something that's very specialized with this, and then you might as well go. And then and certainly nothing that happens uptown would affect that. Okay, electrify buses. Ooh, high class. Which literally also thank you for following 2 weeks ago. Electrify buses, but if the corridor is too busy, lay rails in the bus. So yeah, exactly. The point. So there's something called all fours, which was the planning principle of the BRT, not Bus Rapid Transit, but Brooklyn Rapid Transit, which then became the Brooklyn Manhattan Transit Corporation, or BMT. That was the private subway operator that operated the lines that are colored yellow, gray, and brown. So JMZ. So this was them. This was built for them. The Broadway line was their trunk. Back when several private railways existed, it was not like the Astoria line went to their line and the Flushing line went to 42nd went to 42nd Street as the IRT being the numbered lines, but rather both had through service with the IRT, but there was also separately shuttle service with connections to Queensboro Plaza on the BMT. It was kind of strange, and after unification, they just fixed to be like this. So the Broadway line, and this is I'm coloring this bit orange, but until the 60s, it was purely a BMT line. This was a BMT line up until here, connected here. This was a takeover, I think, in the 40s. Like, this was built in the 30s, this was taken over in the 40s, I think. So anyway, the BMT had this concept called all fours, where you have all four modes of transit, and my Patreon actually uses that as the sub-tiers. Which I don't usually talk about my Patreon, and the reason is that I make most of my income not from Patreon at this point, but if you want to support, it exists. Where the tiers are called diesel bus, trolley bus, streetcar, and rapid transit. So the idea is you operate all four, and you operate them hierarchically. So these are in increasing order of investment, and in decreasing order of so an ascending order of investment cost, descending order of capacity, and operating costs. So on the busiest buses, you intend to upgrade to a trolley or even a tramway, and the busiest among those are where you should be building a subway. Now, this is not what actually happened, because the last BMT extension to be built was the L extension. So the L was built up until Montrose, and then they built this thing to connect it to the older Canarsie branch, which up until then was a branch of the JMZ. Trains went like this. This was the last time they built they extended anything in the 20s. Afterward, depression, city wanting to build things by itself on the IND to outcompete them, but that was the concept. So yeah, it's useful to combine them, but I'm skeptical that you would go trolley, like you would do mass trolleys at this point, but maybe. Yeah, so the trolleys in Cambridge were Yeah, exactly. So the trolleys in Cambridge. So the idea was that not the idea. So the way they actually operated was, and this is something I actually know personally, just because I don't know all of the Boston area equally well, and the people I know disproportionately live along the Cambridge side of the Red Line. Not entirely, but mostly. So the way it works is that there are four lines. There are radial. The red line in Cambridge goes on Mass Ave, and then it goes up until Alewife, and then here from Harvard, that's I think that's the busy that I think that's actually the busiest subway stop outside downtown Boston. It's actually the third or fourth or fifth busiest in the system. I think it goes Downtown Crossing, South Station, Park Street, and Harvard or something like that. And then so there are a bunch of buses that radiate from here, and there's a tunnel. So Boston's always had good bus rail, certainly bus subway integration, leading to a very high subway ridership for an American city with Boston's model split. I think pre-corona, relative to the metro area, so metropolitan statistical area, so that would be the smaller version of the metro area, the one without things like Worcester or Providence. I think it was like 55 or 60 per person per year. New York is 90. New York is more than twice Boston's model split. And so it was just a very rail-oriented system where the point of the buses is to feed the trains, and often they would feed them in an already enclosed place within fare control, because people would have paid the bus fare on the bus. So there's this little tunnel at Harvard. I don't remember if it's at this point within or outside fare control, where the buses stop, but then you just have a quicker transfer to the train. And some of these buses used to be trolleys, 71 and 73. 71 would go to Watertown. Actually, Sid used to live along it for a couple months. And then 73, I forget where it went, like this maybe? Like this? It went to Belmont at any rate. I'm forgetting whether it ended here. Because again, I took the 71 much more. They recently, I think maybe 2 years ago, they dewired them because they decided that the future is batteries, and so they're going to have fleet-wide batteries, so no need for trolley wire. But now they're diesel. And if you think that is a terrible decision, you're correct. And the Bar Foundation should be should be very ashamed of itself for supporting that. Okay, so in Jakarta, so here's the thing. Jakarta has an issue, which is we're talking about trams, because I'm giving examples maybe of tramway and trolleybus networks. And for example, I really like the setup in Praga, especially because it's this combo of 3 metro lines in a triangle, lots of tramways, trolley, whatever you want. So Praga is very good at this. City does not have subways, but it does have lots of trams and trolleybuses. Does City have the largest trolleybus network in Europe? Maybe, I'm not sure. Wien. Now, here's the thing. Praga is a metro area of 2.6 million people. I think there are individual suburbs of Jakarta with more people than that. The region of Jakarta is, if I remember correctly, 35 million people. I'm actually going to check this. So let's do Metro Jakarta and hope that it's going to... No, not the MRT. Not what I meant. I meant the Metro Jakarta region. Can you see that I have a lot of glare in my face? Jakarta. Oh, they're saying here. The metropolitan area has 32 million people. Mid-2022 estimate. Yeah. So take London, Paris, and all of their suburbs combined. Together, they're about 27, or they're about 27. Yeah. So, yeah, what you need in Jakarta, take the London rapid transit network, so the Tube, Overground, Docklands Light Railway, throw that in, Thameslink, Elizabeth Line, all the commuter lines, all of the national rail lines that don't throw on. Then take the metro, the Parisian tramways, let's throw them in, the RER and the Transilien lines that don't run through. Add all of that shit together. This is what Jakarta needs. So yeah, this is the issue with talking about trolleybuses in the context of a city where one metro area has about more population than I think the top 10 German metropolitan areas combined. Yeah, no, Dutch infrastructure has this problem. Like people, there's this really annoying meme that I'm seeing on Urbanist, which is there's infrastructure and there's Dutch infrastructure, about how green Dutch infrastructure is, and I think it's stuff like the Dutch built a road tunnel beneath a canal. For the record, the Netherlands is also very much not the top road tunnel builder either. I know why people overrate how good the Netherlands is at this, but please just stop. They have very high construction costs. They're not actually building that much. The most impressive piece of Dutch public transport infrastructure is not infrastructure, is that because they kind of can't build, their mainline rail network has optimized operations in extremely good ways. The Swiss network is better because the Swiss can build, so the Swiss optimize their rail timetabling for we can build, and so if the trains are 5 minutes longer than they'll need to be, okay, we'll throw a tunnel through the mountain. It'll cost a couple 100 million francs, but it's worth it to make the timed transfers at both ends work out. The Dutch don't have that privilege because the Dutch, as I mentioned, can't build. Their construction costs are terrible. We have a high-speed rail database. I don't think that among the completed lines, the Dutch one is the single most expensive. I think among the ones that are completed and in Europe, it's the most expensive. It's the most expensive relative to tunneling. They had a little bit of tunneling that they didn't really need, but still, it's less expensive than things that are giant mountain tunnels. HSL Zuid cost. This is not in today's money. This is in the euros of 20. This is in the dollars of 20 of 19 years ago. In today's money, I think it's like 110, 120. No, yeah, there are more expensive things. This in today's money might be more expensive. Not sure about the inflation rate between 98 and 04, but plausible. But this is 34% in tunnel. And these are necessary tunnels. Korea is a very hilly country. So the Dutch are just not very good at this. I guess just because they are very good at cycling. They have a very well-deserved reputation for being good at cycling. So people assume they're good at other transport things. Also, the thing is, they speak English. And this is something that worries me, that it's much easier for English speakers to look at how things work in places that speak good English. So Americans, when they bring a foreigner to rebuild their transit system, will often bring a Canadian or a Brit. Now, they can bring Canadians and Brits who are very good at this. For example, Andy Byford. He's British, has a very good record in Canada and Britain. He also has a record in Australia. I'm not saying it's very good because I have no idea about it. I didn't ask people about it. Whereas in Canada, actually, I first heard that he was coming to New York when a Canadian transit journalist was telling me that the story that they were interviewing me about would have to be postponed because they just heard that the head of the TTC was leaving because he had just been hired by New York. And of course, then this journalist told me very positive things about Byford's record in Toronto, and I, of course, checked to have my own take. I checked his most recent job when he was moving to New York, and his record was very good. This is in operations. British people are good at operations in certain things. TfL is a little bit Dutch in that they can't build, but they're excellent at operations. Now, if you go outside the core Anglosphere, it's much more common to go to places that speak English very well as a second language. So that would be the Netherlands, the Nordic countries, and that leads to a lot of neglect of places that don't speak as good English or speak English but not publicly. Let's call it like Germany. In Germany, every person you need to speak English to will speak English. I bought this computer in English. Um, if I had fewer questions, I would have been able to buy it in German, but I had a lot of questions, and one of them was, is there an English keyboard version, or a way to move the operating system to be in English and not in German? So might as well. Um, I mean, if I'm going to sound like a foreigner, might as well. And the and so it's very easy for an American journalist asking questions about trains in Germany to speak to Germans in English. Actually, it's even easier for an American journalist asking about trains in Italy and Spain, which are much less Anglophone, to speak in English in Italy and Spain. Not everyone there speaks English. Actually, recently talked to an Anglophone rail planner in Barcelona, um, who told us, oh yeah, this person that would give this presentation doesn't speak English, but other people do speak English, and it's fine. And the thing is, the Southern Europeans actually are much better at answering emails from English-speaking foreigners in the Nordics. I guess the Nordics don't look up to the Anglosphere, whereas Italy and Spain are much poor. Germans are also better at answering emails than the Nordics. But the point is, Americans would probably just look at places where it's much easier to get by in English, and as a result, there's a lot of accolade for the Netherlands and to some extent the Nordic countries, of which it's again partially deserved, but I think not fully. Also about the NIMBYism, I don't actually know. So Caledosium, how much housing is being built in Jakarta? Because literally there are two countries about which I know anything about housing construction in Southeast Asia. Singapore, where the rates are, I think maybe 6 or 7 housing units built per 1,000 people per year, which is okay. It's not amazing. Tokyo and Seoul are about 10 both. Or rather, Tokyo proper, so 23 special wards, and Metro Seoul are about 10 each. So not comparing apples to apples. I don't know where Metro Tokyo is. I know where Seoul proper is. It's less. Seoul builds in the suburbs more than the city. The other is Bangkok, where I don't remember the numbers. I think they're high. But I did find numbers in Bangkok, and I cannot show them. Even on my old computer, it would not have been easy. It's buried in some file in my history. There are 3 Alans on the screen. Oh, yeah, sorry about the babushka. Okay. Why 14th versus 23rd? Ooh, excellent question. Bus ridership on 14th is so much higher than on 23rd. So much higher. Same thing with 34th. So there is a plan, I think it's called Vision. Is it planned for 42nd or 34th? Is it Vision 34 or Vision 42? No, it's Vision 42. But I have seen Vision 42 that have the trains returning on 34th. These people, IREM, are technical advocates who are very big on pushing through running for commuter trains. I don't agree with everything they say, but they have very good ideas often. So they talk about light rail on 42nd. I think there have been some plans to have a loop with 42nd and 34th. So essentially 2 lines that, again, you connect them. You probably want to connect them at one end just for repositioning and for a shared yard, and they might as well connect at the other. I mean, why not? The thing is, the buses on 34th and on 42nd, yeah, they exist, but they're not that exciting. Like the ridership is not very high. Whereas on 14th it is very high, and ditto 23rd. Now, you could argue that there are developments that would make 42nd and 34th more attractive for buses. Like maybe you can give them much more priority so there's less traffic. But that's true everywhere. I mean, 14th is also very very high traffic, very congested. And conversely, if you build this station, so this is not a station that exists, even though it's a line that's colored solid. So this line exists. The 7, and it has been extended to 34th Street, but this station was supposed to be part of the project and was descoped from it because costs rose, and it was development-oriented transit, so transit that does not really exist to serve existing density, of which there's quite a lot of here, but to stimulate new development here at Hudson Yards. And so so this station was descoped, and I think it should be restored. And if that happens, then buses on 42nd become much less attractive because you can take the subway for a much longer stretch of the street. As I said, new subways are good grounds not to light rail something, existing ones are not. But at any rate, again, this is not a top card. Neither is this, neither is this. Have they gotten a check from the urbanist deep state? So with Bar, at least, with Bar, it's not they got a check. Bar believes in BRT, and I say this. I don't think I've talked to them directly, but I've talked to people who have talked to them, and I've read the reports. They just really like Latin American style BRT. It's something that how is this pronounced? Jaime Lerner, the guy who did this Earth. I think it's Jaime Lerner. Oh, he died. Anyway, so he did the so he kind of invented BRT as we know it, and and after leaving office, he was very aggressive in pushing it globally. I think much more so than the person who set up the much larger system in Bogota, Penelosa, and and as a result, a lot of global BRT supporters like specific things that are how things are done in Curitiba and in Latin America in general. For example, now with some modifications. So one example is that traditionally buses had high floors and you board from low floor curbs on the street. So there are steep steps. So there's no wheelchair accessibility. Now you can install a wheelchair lift. I've seen them in operation in New York. They work, but only technically, and wheelchair users in New York told me that they're unreliable. But even without wheelchairs, it takes a lot of time to board the bus. So I'm not going to say most places, because I imagine that the biggest bus networks are not in a developed country. But in most developed countries, the solution has been low floor buses. So you lower the floor of the bus so that it's still a step up, but to have a wheelchair, you don't need to have a weird lift. You have instead you have like a gizmo that deploys like this, and it's only a couple seconds in each direction. And wheelchair users that I've interviewed on this in the United States told me that does work, and I've seen it work for wheelchair users in practice. And even again, without wheelchairs, it's very fast boarding. Now you do lose a little bit of space because the high floor is above the wheel and the low floor is below the wheel, so there's like a little bit of carve out space for the wheel. But on that, it's a big benefit. However, in Latin America, instead, because the whole point of BRT was to build a metro but cheaper, what they did was they have high floor buses, and then they have raised platforms as if it's a metro station, but instead of a train, what comes is a bus. So I think in American applications they have learned to do low floor, but other applications they haven't fully learned. Like there's a little bit of European BRT, but it's not done that way. It's usually just high quality bus lanes that are not supposed to cover the entire route. They just cover stretches that don't correspond to routes. Several routes may share them and then branch away. In French, it's not even called BRT. In French, it's called bus with high level of service. So they're not pretending that they are a metro. So the point is that I don't think Bar is getting paid from some industry. They just believe in a certain kind of BRT, and this leads them to have some good suggestions. One of them, something that I wish American cities that did bus improvements learned better, was because the bus is supposed to imitate the metro, the bus must run in the center. So the main think tank that's pushing it's called Institute for Transportation Development Policy. These people, they say that the correct way to do BRT is the bus lanes must be in the middle of the street. Now the norm for local buses, the bus lanes are on the curb. If there are bus lanes. And so instead, it's median lanes with boarding islands between the median lane, which should be dedicated to buses, and the next outer lane, which could be a car lane. And this is something that they push correctly. Now, they understand in Boston it's very hard to do because of because the streets are usually very narrow. ITDP will talk about all the various compromises, but it will treat them as compromises. Ideally, you should not do that. So sometimes they have good practices, but they also have bad practices. Like they really like that it's diesel, no fixed infrastructure, because fixed infrastructure is said to be too expensive, which is something that very much is true in 1980s, 90s Brazil. In today, I mean, I'm not even sure. So Brazil does have high construction costs by Latin American standards, but at this point, wages are higher to the point that that you can't just very easily employ masses and masses of bus drivers. And in the rest of Latin America, construction costs are not as high. In Bogota, they actually are kind of on the high side, but you have places like Santiago and Quito, Panama, Santo Domingo, where they have very low construction costs, so they just build metros. So play Discord. About my original route map. Extending the LRR build. Oh, okay. So let's not. Okay, so how about this? I'm gonna keep the map in case people have further questions, and share the other map. I depicted this on two maps, which is kind of clunky, but it would be too cluttered if I did it on one map. I am a big believer in geographically accurate maps. So note that I am showing you a geographically accurate map of a slice of the region, the centralmost. I'm not doing a schematic of the entire region to depict all of the stops. And the reason I do this, the reason I do it this way is I believe that when you crayon, you should show where the lines are going. Conversely, the information that is being omitted is where the lines are going outside. That's not terribly important. What would I do? Show you the names of the stations? I'm not writing names of stations in this. So anyway, about what you asked about the Belmont branch. So first of all, let's make sure that I click the right link, which is going to take a little bit of time to load. When I said it's 53 megs, I was not kidding. What I meant is it's 53 megs. This is the Belmont branches for the racetrack. So the question is it useful to extend to turn full time? I don't know. This is not a very compelling area. These are much more compelling places. Extend it. I mean, maybe. I mean, where would you go? The problem is this is a parkway, which is a nice word for a freeway where you're not allowed to put trucks or buses. So this is not the most compelling corridor. Now, if you want to hit Cambria Heights, yeah, you could try to do something like this. But at that point, you're building enough tunneling that you might as well just make it a full subway line on Linden, which is exactly what I'm proposing, which is this. Note that this doesn't even go all the way to the parkway because it's just not important. It's not because it takes even much frequency for Hampstead. It would just not be a very strong line. Okay. Do I have any more any information on all four? No. I think I read it's something that I read on Wikipedia and then was talking about in blog comments, and it's something that essentially Jarrett Walker endorsed. So Jarrett Walker did not endorse it in the expression all four, because Jarrett Walker, for people who do not know, is this guy. I mentioned before how Americans who look to experience abroad look for Anglo experience first. Jarrett has it. He worked for many years as a consultant in I think it was not in the United States. So he's Portland based, I believe. But for a while while would be many years. He worked in, I'm forgetting whether just Sydney or Sydney and Melbourne, Auckland, Vancouver. I don't remember in what order. I believe these are the cities he worked in. So very extensive non-US UK Anglo experience. These are places with actually decent things that they're doing with their transit networks. Now, Auckland is very auto-oriented, but it is undergoing a massive transit revival, which is mostly not bus but rail. Sydney has a pre-corona model split of, I think, 26 or 27%, not much less than New York City. Especially impressive since I keep hammering on the issue of the importance of strong centralized central business districts, which, for example, New York very famously has. Um, Paris is less famous, Berlin is less famous. Both have very strong central districts, which are maybe not small high rise, but slightly larger and mid to high rise, but they're still city centers. And but Sydney doesn't have that. Sydney and Melbourne are actually they're not let's say American Sunbelt decentralized, but they're more decentralized than let's say New York or Paris, and they still maintain decent model split. So anyway, so he became a transit consultant back in the United States. I think it's related to Obamacare. I think he was uninsurable in the United States without Obamacare. I think he mentioned it once. And so anyway, he pushes bus reforms, and you can kind of see what I just sure you can just read the recent post about Akron, Ohio. He does a lot of bus redesigns. What he likes doing is he keeps saying that there's no. It actually generated a lot of controversy when he posted, I think, 14 years ago, that streetcars don't actually generate benefits over buses. And I was the main person arguing against, and I was sharing this paper that I keep sharing, except it disappeared from the internet, by a guy named Ed Tennyson, spelled this way. If you can find the paper, that would be nice. It's called Rail Bias, and what he did, I think it was like in the 90s, he looked at bustitution, so replacements of streetcars with buses in post-war America, and then he looked at the first generation light rail networks in the 70s and 80s in places like San Diego and Portland. And he looked at what happened to ridership when the streetcars were replaced with buses. The ridership always fell, and when the new light rail systems were built, the ridership always rose. And he netted out the impact of speed, because in both cases the streetcars were faster. The streetcars were in the center lanes. Drivers respected them more than they did buses. So the buses actually were slower than the streetcars that they replaced in the 50s. Likewise, the new light rail systems were faster. So he netted out the impact of speed from known ridership elasticities, and he found that even when you net it out, there's a rail bias. Passengers still ride trains more than buses by about 1/3. So 34 to 43% was what he said. So again, I've had a back and forth with Jared about this. So Jared does not believe in all four or anything, but he does believe that light rail is good on capacity. So if the buses are bursting at the seams, there's way too much traffic, the buses are all bunched, then you put a train. Now, he managed to, at one point when I was talking to him, he said, the strongest argument for a rail line is a full bus line. That was his quote. So anyway, so he does that kind of as an implementation. So again, for him, it's a matter of capacity. Honestly, all Fords was probably also a matter of capacity, because it's just in the 1920s, ridership was so much higher that things could actually hit capacity. The part where the buses and the trains didn't always have fare integration is kind of sad, but they're working on fixing it. Can you have a technocrat? This being Southeast Asia, the technocrat is probably someone who thinks Xi Jinping is based. It's kind of remarkable how any person who talks about scientific management in that region probably thinks that the problem is that the King of Thailand is insufficiently autocratic, or that Xi Jinping has not literally exterminated the Uyghurs yet. And so the democracy movement tends to have a lot of anti-state elements to it, not just anti-authoritarian elements, but also certain anti-state. I mean, let's not exaggerate. The region's entire democracy movement was better on Corona than the state, the authoritarian states in, for example, Hong Kong. But for example, the Asian left is very new left on matters like nuclear power. They're all against nuclear power. Whereas here, for example, the Green parties often drive this issue and they're anti-nuclear, but social democratic parties are not anti-nuclear. And in Czechia, the Pirate Party, so the same kind of anti-authoritarian, anti-corruption kind of new left type party, they're pro-nuclear power. They support the construction of a new nuclear plant. Their only objection was that Babiš was considering hiring Rosatom for this, and like reasons of they are against Putin and against Russian interference. They wanted not Rosatom, but literally anyone else. It was, I think, 2 American bidders and then the French and Korean state companies. That Rotom is currently broken. Yeah. Oh wow, yeah. There's infrastructure and Dutch infrastructure. Yep. Oh, there's a lot of single family homes. Yeah, I mean, okay, question. Is there a lot of single family zoning in Jakarta, or is it just in the rich areas? Because it's often a problem in former colonies where the area that used to be where the white people were was single family because gentlemen don't live on shelves or whatever. And I mean, yeah, land values were high, but on the salary of a British or Dutch bureaucrat, you could afford to get one house with lots of space around it in the center of Mumbai or Nairobi or Jakarta. Because this is an issue, but this is a relative issue. So when I say relative, so there are 2 separate issues with NIMBYism. The first is how much housing is built, and the second is where it is being built. So let's go back to Vancouver for a sec. Vancouver has absolutely no problem with the quantity of housing that's being built. Maybe it has a little bit, not absolutely, but it has, for the most part, no problem with the quantity of housing being built. The amount of housing, so, okay, this is where I need to have my blog up because I did have links. So I'm going to put Vancouver and Oslo in the search and hope to get the correct post. Yep, that one. So, first of all, we might notice that Canada is toward the high end in how much housing is being built. This is all Western countries. I don't have data for Japan, Korea, Taiwan, only for their capitals. Australia is very high. So Canada is 5.8, Vancouver, and there are links here. Metro Vancouver is about 10. Vancouver proper is more than that, so it's not even just in the suburbs, not just suburban sprawl or something. However, you see this area? It's called Chauncey. I've met racist NIMBYs in Vancouver, and Vancouver is a place where there's a lot of casual racism. People openly tell me, give me their hot takes about mostly Indigenous people, but occasionally also Chinese people. Those and the people that I talk to, the racists, the NIMBYs, whenever I said, oh yeah, the problem is that Chauncey refuses upzoning, then instead of being NIMBY, they said, oh yeah, those assholes in Chauncey, they're terrible. Yeah, they should stop doing that. This is Chauncey. This is the land use in Chauncey. It's all single family zoning. It's not because literally nobody here will sell to a developer or will make it something bigger. I actually have a colleague who used to live in the electoral district, I imagine for the province, not the federal one, because the federal ridings are bigger. But for the province or something, lived in a mostly Chauncey district, not in Chauncey, in an apartment building somewhere, and Chauncey made sure the ballot box would be at the opposite end of the riding from where they live, just to make it harder for apartment dwellers to vote. These are people who, at one point, interviewed for the media, managed to give the quote opposing some, I don't even remember what. Maybe upzoning, maybe bus lanes, maybe bikes, I don't remember. They said, we are the creme de la creme. They actually used the expression creme de la creme to describe themselves. When talking to a journalist who, judging by my recollection of what newspaper it was not a journalist who was being undercover. This person identified themselves as a journalist, and people, and this person in Chauncey thought it was appropriate to use that expression. This is the sort of people who live in Chauncey. Housing is not being built here. Housing is being built a little bit here because, as I mentioned in my last video, an indigenous tribe, and it turned out to have sovereignty over a sliver of land here. And so they built whatever they wanted, and they have sovereignty. What the hell is the province going to do about it? But other than that, they don't build much housing in rich areas. Again, to some extent, near Broadway and 4th, but only to some extent, and nowhere in very wealthy single-family areas that are still inner enough that they could be transit-oriented development. Instead, Vancouver builds usually in clusters around SkyTrain stations, which are mostly East Vancouver, so less wealthy. So the quantity in Vancouver is okay. I'm not going to say amazing, because with their immigration levels, they should be building more, but I mean, not twice as much. New York should be building 4 times or 5 times as much as it's building. Vancouver should be building 20% more than it's building. So they don't really have a problem with quantity. They have a problem with where. So this is what I'm asking in the case of Jakarta. French people, what? Yeah. Babish, the corrupt bastard, yes, him. Yeah, that guy. He tried to also be president and lost to the former. Was he the chief of staff of the Czech army or something? The current president. I don't remember. He was a general and then became the first former Warsaw Pact general to head NATO. To have a certain title. I mean, you don't head NATO. I mean, practice the head of NATO is Joe Biden. Yeah, okay, so it's mostly, yeah, okay. Huh. Yeah, Vancouver is very NIMBY. No, the people, no, Vancouver is very racist. They hate the fact that Indians get to develop without some Karens having opinions. However, A, they can't do anything about it. And B, there is actually a lot of stuff that's being built in Vancouver even without Indigenous sovereignty, just not here. Instead, it's here. There's a very sharp east-west gradient in Moncton. So UBC, professors, postdocs, grad students, and the undergrads are all over. That's kind of the social division. I would know this because I was a postdoc. At one point, I rode the bus back home with the students. I got off first. But it's not with the students. I got off first. They were all commuters. It's a commuter college. It's not something that's very common in the United States, I guess, because in the United States, usually you associate commuter colleges with places that are less selective and might not even award a 4-year degree, and certainly would not award a PhD. But in Canada, it's much more common to live probably with your parents while going to uni in the city that you live in, Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal, whatever, Ottawa, Winnipeg, or if you don't, or if you move for college, you rent an apartment with a bunch of other students, but you don't. But it's not much of a dorm culture. So it's a commuter college, even though, again, in America, a lot of commuter colleges exist, but usually are not this big, and they're also never this prestigious. So skipping down a bit, moving back up. Okay. Should there be infill on the L? No, because it's not possible. Railfans have actually asked for this because it's a very logical location here to build a new station to serve the eastern parts of Sighttown and parts of the East Village. I remember actually one of the railfans posted the response from New York City Transit, which would have been 2007, which was not the grades are too steep. And I'm inclined. I mean, I was more trusting of them than I am now, but I don't think that is likely to be bullshit. Yeah, French people, whatever. I mean, at some point, if they don't get their economic growth up, they'll just be like Italy, and then they'll just be forced to learn English. But conversely, if they get their economic growth up, they'll be like Germany, and then they'll also have to learn English. Like, I mean, okay. Previous map had the sign line. Oh! Thanks for the question on the card. Yeah, good question. Yeah. So, for the record, usually I don't call these lines by color. When I blog, I give them consistent numbers, which are supposed to be roughly the order in which you're built. So red is 1 because this is a tunnel that pre-exists. This is the existing tunnel. Green is 2. This is not the correct alignment, by the way. This is the gateway tunnel that's being built, and it's being built roughly this way. So not literally next to the existing tunnel, which is here, but much farther to the south. And I'm saying that should be extended to Grand Central through connections. This is line 3, orange. Mostly exists. This tunnel looks a little different. It goes from a different part of Penn Station and single track, so just realign the tunnel. This is why I'm saying realignment 1 kilometer at this cost. It's rather high, especially for no stations, but it is interfering with Penn Station and it is Midtown Manhattan, so high cost by non-New York standards. And then blue is what I call line 4. So because it's kind of like the core system when I plan timetables to try to see how everything fits is just 1, 2, 3. 4 is much more crayony just because of how long it is. It's Grand Central to Grand Central to Staten Island. I don't think people have asked, but I said it in the post. This stop spacing is not something that I'm wedded to, so I'm drawing it as a single Lower Manhattan stop around Fulton Street. I can absolutely see a case for 2, so City Hall and South Ferry maybe. South Ferry could be just blue, could be just yellow. Yellow is or oak or whatever. That's line 5. This should be cross-platform. Important so that people can transfer because probably there are going to be a lot of people trying to go Brooklyn to Grand Central, so give them cross-platform transfer. Could be stop at Governor's Island. Could be I'm doing a stop at Borough Hall, but you could also omit the stop maybe. So a bunch of, you could do a stop in the Village on line 5. This is line 6, which is partly a thing. Usually when you do a little more crayon, instead of doing 3 lines, you do 5. I call it 5, but it's 5.5 because this exists. This is East Side Access, just opened. And then the idea is to extend the East Side Access tunnel to the south, which is non-trivial. They entombed the tunnel boring machine when they built this under the assumption it would never be extended, but I mean, by the standards of building all of this, it's not that expensive. Stop here. Probably want to stop in the Village, not just 14th. Then this. And then line 7 is us. But anyway, so why is line 7 not bending? It could be. I'm not wedded to it. It could. So you could do line 7 bending to meet this. Just remember that it would not go here because the actual line is here. The actual tunnel is not under construction because it's not fully funded, but under design and engineering, is to be built here. So I guess so you could build like this. It's just going to be kind of complicated because we have to cross the existing tunnel. So I'm not wedded to this. The fact that this system does not let you have trips internal to Jersey without changing trains in New York or using this map. As I said, it's kind of awkward, but it would be too cluttered to do it the other way. Where this is where I'm drawing the right, or maybe this is where I'm drawing the line 7. No, one south of Bergen Line Avenue, of the stop called Bergen Line Avenue. So no, here is line 7. So 50th Street, line 7. Okay, right, because line 7 is 43rd Street. And then this is where it is where I'm drawing it because of the proposed tunnel, but actually it should be here. Maybe even stop here, maybe even exit here. So either take the subway one stop, which is an annoying 3-seat ride, and it's not going to be an easy transfer, just the location is really constrained. So it'd be, 3 minutes walking time each way. Or you transfer in Manhattan, which is kind of awkward, or you bend this. There are no great solutions. At this point, I will defend this just because of the difficulty of doing a dogleg. But again, I'm not wedded to it. Is there a logical electrification sequence? Just do everything. Like the issue with sequence. So I don't like answering questions about sequences in projects where all parts have very high returns on investment. Often each one having higher returns on investment than the previous one, and it's also that you can sequence because there are network effects. And I've done this when I crayoned high-speed rail a couple of months ago for Eastern Europe, where it was the same thing. Every single section of the network that I was crayoning, which I actually blogged about, so high-speed rail. I'm gonna say Poland because it's mostly, but it's this one. So I drew this on stream a couple of months ago, I guess 2 months ago. Every single section of this, with the exception of this one, which is kind of parallel to something that already exists, has higher projected ridership measured in passenger kilometers added to the network divided by the overall length of the new section to be added than the overall. Why? Because of network effects. So let's say you don't build this section to Warszawa. Well, what this means is that Warszawa is not part of the network, and so you're gonna get, let's say, trains from Berlin, passengers from Berlin to Gdansk, to Łódź, but with this section, you're building a little bit extra, and then you have passenger kilometers not from Warszawa to Łódź, but also Warszawa to Katowice, to Berlin, to Praga, to Wien, to Bratislava. And with that way, and that way, you have way more, to say Praga in point here, Praga. And then that way, you get way higher network density. And so with electrification, it's kind of the same in that the last piece of wire on a system lets you retire the diesels entirely. It lets you unify operating roles. It lets you unify maintenance. The Long Island Railroad, for example, has separate crews for diesel and electric. Nearly the entire Long Island Railroad is electric. I believe that everything that is crayoned here is electric. Everything that appears on the map, even without card, is electric, with the exception of this thing. This is the Oyster Bay branch, which I'm not depicting as part of the system because it's very weak in ridership and the land use is beyond abominable for mass transit. Long Island is extraordinarily NIMBY. I talk about things like 5 or 10 units built per 1,000 people per year. Long Island was, for most of the 2010s, less than 1. So this is the land use in question. This is not as dense, but I mean there are pockets of density around the stations, around Great Neck and Port Washington. But here in Oyster Bay, it's just no. Now you could say, well, let's overrule the NIMBYs and do transit-oriented development. Yes, great idea. But why start here? I mean, there's this. Like, this is an extraordinarily desirable area. It's adjacent to the city. It's spillover from... So the North Shore is richer than the South Shore. This is the North Shore adjacent to the city. So the people who generally are okay with the city but just want snootier schools go here. I think Manhasset at one point had the... I don't remember if it had the school district that was ranked number 1 in the state, or it was number 1 in spending per student or something like that. But it's people pay a lot of money to live in Manhasset, often because the Manhasset schools are very well recognized, which means that this is exactly where you would put the transit-oriented development with even some income-restricted housing so that poor people can have access to snooty schools as well. And I say snooty, you would think maybe private schools. Just as a reminder, this is America. This is not, let's say, Britain or India. I don't know if Indonesia is also like this, maybe, where the snooty schools are private. The United States is like 4 private schools. Sorry. Snooty America has about 4 private schools. The United States actually has a lot of private schools, but most likely they are religious schools, like parochial schools, for people who want religious education, or are in parts of the American South racial segregation. Ooh, you found the paper, because I always... Ooh, nice, thank you. I only saw dead links to it. Thank you very much. So about logical electrification, the point is that so the LIRR is almost entirely electrified. Only a couple branches aren't, and they're very weak. The only branch that is unelectrified that has high ridership is this one. So Huntington Station is the end of electrification. Beyond that, on the Port Jefferson branch, the trains are diesel. So there are 3 really strong relative terms, diesel parts of the system. One is the LRR, I just showed you what it is. It's Port Jeff. The other is the Upper Hudson. It's only electrified up to Croton-on-Hudson, Corcoran-Harmon, and up to Poughkeepsie, it's diesel. And the third is the Raritan Valley Line in Jersey. So Raritan Valley Line this is the intersection of it. So these are things that should be electrified first, but honestly, just start going on everything and open as you go. Like how in Israel, they're doing everything at once. So even though the strongest single section which is Tel Aviv to Haifa, is still not electrified because of NIMBYism in Haifa. They're still going to do it. Just they don't need to delay the rest of the system just because they need to build everything. And because the LIR, as I said, has separate crew rules for diesel and electric, the diesel crews are very inefficient. I heard that the frequency is really low. There's no point in increasing it because it's only in very far away areas where I showed you the land use on the Oyster Bay branch. The others are very far away from the city, so it's unlikely they're going to get a lot of all-day ridership. Again, the Port Jefferson branch might because it's connecting Stony Brook, the university, and Port Jeff also has a little bit of an urban core, but for the most part, it's just suburbs. It's not an urban core that then turned into a suburb, like let's say New Haven or I guess Port Jeff. It's places that exist only as suburbs, so there's no real reason to increase frequency there. I mean, you can do it, but it's not going to be very useful. And it's so peaky that one crew shift, one crew assignment is one-way trip a day. It's a very long one, I think 2.5 hours. You deadhead the way back. So yeah, your assignment is to drive a train for 2.5 hours in a workday. That's your day. It's just diesel inefficiency. And so eliminating these diesels actually has an advantage. So you either close service or electrify. And you should not be closing service, not things that connect to New York City of all places. Okay, so if you're asking me what kind of catenary, yeah, so everything that can be connected with the Northeast Corridor gets catenary. Now, the LIRR and Metro North are third rail. Well, Metro North, New Haven line, from about here onward, it's catenary, and this is also catenary, but the Harlem and Hudson lines and a little bit of stretch of New Haven are third rail, and not even the same third rail here. This is the same third rail as the subway. So the shoe is above the third rail, and here the shoe is below the third rail, which is a little safer but a little more complicated. And this is why also, by the way, when you look at the third rail and the LIR on the subway, it's double. There's like the third rail and then a thing above it. It's so that if you fall, you don't hit the third rail, you hit the, I think, wooden thing above it. And anyway, so this should be catenary because intercities should eventually use that to some extent. This has a little diesel branch that has, I think, 2 trains a day. The electrification of the Harlem line extends very far north. They extended it. So this is Cortland Harmon. It's the end of electrification on the Hudson. On the Harlem, it's called Southeast, and it's here. And then above that, and then beyond that, you get to here, and if it looks kind of undeveloped here, it's because it is. As I said, I think it's 2 trains a day in each direction or something like that. So, you can. So if for some reason you can't even electrify, it's even okay to close the line, or like turn it into some kind of DMU that isn't even interfacing with the city but continues to Danbury or something like that. Just get out of the way. So this would be third rail because it's captive, and at the scale that New York needs, they can say, hi, we also want a couple hundred cars of third rail in addition to a couple thousand cars with catenary. The LIR, same thing, just extend what you have. It's not that important to unify all the electrification systems at this scale. Remember, New York has scale. New York is capable of making demands, not ridiculous demands, but electrification is very modular that way. BC United. Yeah, I prefer Japan and Korea. I mean, if about deporting the Karens back to Europe, I mean, Europe is not YIMBY. I mean, it's YIMBYer than the United States, but Canada builds a lot more housing than anywhere in Europe. Just don't forget that. I mean, sorry. Vancouver builds a lot more housing than any city in Europe. I mean, Canada, including, like, poor parts of Quebec, maybe not. Some of the maps, okay. Is that meant to run all the way? Probably not. So, for people who don't know what the central branch is, so you might be able to tell the gashes, where the trains are. Main line. Then it has this split going north and south. Main line goes south, and then this gash to the north fork of the island. But trains barely run past Ronkonkoma. So this is a giant park and ride. end of electrification. I think it's the busiest stop. Before Corona, I think this and Hicksville were the top two stations. I don't remember which was big. I think at the time I checked, which was 2006 or something like that, this was busier, but maybe they switched positions or something. Ridership beyond Ronkonkoma is a rounding error. Central branch. So now there's the South Shore, which is this. It's this train. It's South Shore, so denser and poorer. Not poor, but like lower middle class, maybe. Not as rich. Separate line, electrification ends at Babylon, so way less far out than Ronkonkoma, and ridership past Babylon is not great, but it's not zero. So people keep talking about extending to Patchogue, I think. And there's also a bunch of intercity ridership because of the Hamptons. I mean, I think Sag Harbor here is literally mentioned in Moby Dick, so it's not purely suburb. I mean, places are at this point mostly recreation for rich New Yorkers, but that's still a place and not just pure suburb. So anyway, Central Branch, you might be able to tell that there's something in addition, which is, so again, this is the main line. So you can have, so the main line goes like this, but you can take the curve here to Babylon. Trains run on this, or used to run on this, maybe one a day or two a day. They would be diesels because this is unelectrified, and we're just thinking expresses from Babylon to the city. Just because here there are too many stops for express trains, and here too, but they run one way at peak because they didn't care about reverse commutes. And so some crayon has this, some doesn't. I used to have this. I'm uncertain. I kind of left it from this on purpose because I didn't want to decide, and I don't think it's that important. The main ridership generators. So the way I'm envisioning this is the orange line, so line 3 runs local, line 6, the purple one runs express. So these stops are mostly just orange. Like so Sunnyside, so this one actually probably should be another stop here, Sunnyside. So this junction should be also line 6. Jamaica, most important transfer point, also line 6, but line 6 should not make these intermediates. And then line 6 probably wants to go non-stop up to Floral Park and make these line 3 only, like orange only, not purple. And then there should be purple stops. So purple stops should be more express, but even they, I mean, the main ridership generator is Mineola. These intermediates, Hicksville. Past Hicksville, yeah, it's nice, but I mean, it's not that critical. So yeah, maybe you include it, maybe you don't. And, but I would, but I don't think it's terribly important either way, just because it's not a very strong line. I mean, Babylon. I mean, hitting Babylon is nice, but I mean, it would not be very express because it would have to make all these intermediate stops. It's not actually worth it to skip them to give Babylon Express. So I don't think it's going to be that much faster than just going along this line. Three-way Lower Manhattan stations. Okay. So when you're talking about wrong way, okay. So maybe. So the problem. So yeah, this is going to be much better service if there are 3 stations on the overlap between lines 4 and 5, where the idea is that the central station has cross-platform transfers in the right direction. So in this case, it would be Brooklyn to Midtown or Staten Island to Jersey. And then 2 more stations, both of which have wrong way interleaves that the wrong way transfers are cross-platform. So you do Jersey to Midtown or Brooklyn to Staten Island. This is really nice because you do want to connect Staten Island to Brooklyn without forcing elevation change. Ditto Erie to, it's called Newport now, Newport to Lower Manhattan, Lower Manhattan to Midtown. However, land use, let's look at the land use in Lower Manhattan for a bit. This is the land use in Lower Manhattan. The streets are kind of wide, some of them, but not all of them. I believe every single usable north-south street has a subway underneath it, with the exception of West Street. You can put the tunnel in West Street if you'd like, but it's going to be too far. So yeah, you're saving money by doing this, but you're throwing away a lot of ridership. How do you build here? You probably do a mined cavern. I don't think there's an alternative to a mined cavern. You can do the Barcelona method, which is you do a big dig, like a tunnel of maybe a 12 or 13 meter diameter, and then you can put the platforms in the tunnel. There are two problems with it. The first is that when the tunnel is that wide, there are certain nonlinearities concerning building settlement. Now, the ground here is very hard. It's schist, but also think what's above it. So I would not take that risk. And the second problem is that you don't get very wide platforms this way. So Barcelona uses this for Line 9 because it's just a metro line in Barcelona, which is also the single most expensive subway line built in Spain, I think per kilometer by a factor of like 1.5, by which I mean it's still cheaper than the global average. I think it's in today's money in dollars probably about 200 million a kilometer. Again, by a margin, the most expensive thing per kilometer that I know of in the entirety of Spain. I think I know some things that are more expensive, not in Spain, but in the rest of Southern Europe, but these are projects that were legendarily corrupt, like certain things in 1980s Milan and Rome. At this point, Milan and Rome are a little cheaper than that. Maybe not when they're running into architecture from the 1st century, but when they're running into more reasonable history, like 19th century, yeah. So yeah, this is gonna be mined. I think I figured out how much it would cost to build each such station. And if it's pure mined, I believe the answer is about $1 billion. Not $1 billion that New York costs, $1 billion. The 3 stations of 2nd Avenue subway in today's money are about a bill each. This one was built cut and cover, but a giant dig, like 500 meters by way too much. These were only 350 or something. I think this was 300, it was 400. It should have been 180. And so they were also mined. Now they should not have been mined, and also the procurement was rather broken, and the response to the broken procurement was to break the procurement even further. And also, they only peripherally learned lessons and are making most of the same, not all, but most of the same mistakes again for the second phase. I've negative confidence in the ability of the people in charge of capital construction, the MTA, to resolve things. They seem to be in full damage control mode, aka trying to convince, not the public because the public doesn't buy any of it, but themselves that randos from NYU are telling them that they're expensive, don't know what they're talking about. So anyway, one bill mined, yeah. So this size of station probably is what they should do here. This is Upper East Side, this is Lower Manhattan. Yeah, you can unfuck the procurement, but $1 billion. So when you're asserting that there should be 3 stations instead of 1, what you're asserting is that they should be spending $2 billion more on saving the elevation change when you change trains. And just to be clear, when you build this mind, it's going to be 2 levels. One northbound, counting this as north, one southbound, counting this as south. Lots of staircases and escalators between them. It's going to be really easy to build elevation change infrastructure, so vertical transportation within the 2 levels. The problem is going to be connecting it to the street because all of these exist. So pleb place to place the escalators would have them go through the tracks here. So you need to be a little bit creative. If there are 2 stops, not 1, it's because the only places that you can build exits are here, maybe City Hall Park, maybe the Battery, maybe Zuccotti Park. So usually when I crane exits at Zuccotti and City Hall Park. And then if you can hit Fulton Street, passageways in there. But there's a reason I'm only crayoning one station, and this is. I'm saying that this should be $5 billion, and I'm pretty sure that if you do 3 stations, the five turns into a 7. Do you get extra benefit for that? Yes. Do you get 40% more benefit? No, you don't. Yeah, Manhattan, Port Washington. Yeah, Port Washington, Great Neck. They're also very renowned for their schools, aka just adjacent to the city, and you don't need to deal with city public schools and the various negative stereotypes that the sort of people who flee to the suburbs have for them. Q. Why does the tram only display trams in New York? Good question. I wasn't thinking about LIR or about HBR. But it's an oversight on my part. Also, no, they didn't do any of the air trains. So the map does not display the air trains. I mean, it does because of the layer, but it doesn't display them properly. The other issue with HBLR is that so much of it is getting gutted for subway in this crayon. So there's a little bit of a subway that's being built just to change the current setup where this is part of path and it branches here and here to two lines that cross at Exchange Place. One going directly to Manhattan and the other going to Manhattan somewhere else within a tunnel. HBLR goes on the surface here. You can keep this on the surface. Why wouldn't you? But and then these are HBLR branches that that are grade separated because they're separate. They're historic rights of way. Maybe they have some grade crossings with gates or something. But these are fundamentally rapid transit lines that got shoehorned into light rail. This and this. These would be elevated. The extensions that I'm crayoning. Note I'm saying L. I'm not saying at grade or in right of way. And I guess here I'm saying what am I saying here? Oh, L. And I guess this is then a subway. There's a little bit of HBLR here on the backside of Hoboken. There's this tunnel which would get cut for subway. This is a historic mainline rail tunnel. So I'm not. I should probably depict it just to make it clear what stays, but I was not depicting things other than the subway and the New York trams. I don't actually know if there's a good case for new trams on the Jersey City side, just because the corridors there. It's mostly north-south stuff, so Bergen Line and then JFK, and I imagine the subway would just eviscerate everything else, like the demand for everything else. Yeah, Newark was entirely oversight on my part. Which is especially because I mean I guess it's maybe more interesting to show this just because this stop does not exist on commuter rail. The stops go Newark, Broad, and then East Orange. And this is something that I am proposing as infill in order to have the connection. So maybe depicting this would be interesting. I used to do some really wild crayon where this would turn into full subway lines or something, but anyway, okay, this gets to okay, I'm caught up with chat. Are there more questions? What's the lag? New computer does not mean I no longer have lag. So camera looks different even though it's the same camera. Imagine mic sounds the same because it's the same mic. But yeah. But anyway, are there further questions? Because if not, we can end this. It's, I guess, an hour 45 recording, which is, I guess, normal, a little bit less than average for me. Oh, quick one. Subways to okay. So I will say. So again, I was drawing these maps on like the same base and then toggling between them, and I was hoping to. So I will say, yeah. So Southeast Queens, you're right that some of the extensions clash, right? So let's see. What am I proposing for Southeast Queens? I am proposing. And it's not depicted, but that there should be perfect fare integration, which means that you can take the air train currently from here in Jamaica to the airport for normal MetroCard fare or Omni fare. This is why the trams here. So I'm crayoning a tram extension. I used to only crayon one of these, or so I used to crayon that church only goes up until here, I think. Now, I believe the current Brooklyn buses have something starting from here and then eventually going along Linden to the airport. So it goes, I think it goes like this to the terminals. And even in our bus redesigns, first of all, we propose that it should be church just because it's a logical extension. Second, that and here or at long-term parking, and then people can just transfer. At long-term parking, it's already a free transfer. So likewise, the tramway, this is the Q10, should only go as far as there. I don't remember if the Q10 even goes to the airport or just makes people transfer to the air train where it's free. And their train it's driverless, it should be frequent enough, it shouldn't be a problem. And so this is a different bus line. It should be trammed into JFK, and again, free transfers for the rest of the airport. These are also very strong buses, and subway and commuter rail, and I'm open to the suggestion that this is overkill, and in the presence of the commuter lines, the demand for this vanishes, and these should probably all also not be as strong. The reason I keep the trams, at least, is that the trams and most of these stations are opposite sides of the Belt Parkway. So walking from here to Rosedale is not the best. Walking from here to Laurelton is bleh. Walking from here to Locust Manor. So this is why I'm keeping this. And once it's here, it might as well continue. It's a little bit of a clash where these are really close to each other, and I can see a case for even extending it a little bit to Valley Stream. But I don't know. I will admit to being rather city-centric in these maps. This is an easier walk. So maybe, actually. Just because of how close it is, maybe not. This... So the E extension... Here in Cambria Heights, it's not actually that close to the LRR. I mean, there's density. I mean, it's not very dense by New York standards, but I mean, it's like, I think these census tracts are like 6,000 or 7,000 people per square kilometer. That's not nothing. And it's not just any 6,000 people per square kilometer that you mop in the middle of nowhere. No. What are you connecting them with? Well, Jamaica, and then express trains that go to Midtown Manhattan. Yeah, you should even... this should reduce your density threshold. The bigger your city center, the more interesting what you connect with, the lower the density required for residential areas to be worth connecting to is. It's like with high-speed rail. I mean, if at the other end what you have is Munich, yeah, you should probably have a sizable city at the other end to justify this. Very sizable, maybe Frankfurt or something, or Berlin, even bigger. If what you have at the other end is Tokyo, you can support a train from fucking Kanazawa, or Niigata. Okay. Okay, more questions, and I accidentally X'd Twitch, and we will soon see if I can how easily I can do this. I'm pretty sure that I told them to keep me signed in, so yep, this does actually work, and it doesn't kill the stream because it's OBS. Okay, LRR infill in Southeast Queens. Yep, that's part of the program. The infills are not clearly this map doesn't as clearly note what is new, what is old, but there are more stops here. Like, this is not a stop that exists. Here I'm not doing infill, and that's because this line is kind of supposed to be an express version of this one. And it's kind of close to stations. the locations are not great relative to the bus and any tram network you would do, because you kind of want something on Farmers, you kind of want something on Merrick, and would you do a station with exits here and here? Maybe that's a little sus. And then Springfield is here, so this is kind of not great. You would not do 3 stations or even 2. Whereas here you hit Linden pretty easy. And here you hit Linden and Brewer. And so this is so I'm including a little bit of info. Yeah, they are sparse, but again, it's a little bit awkward. Is there any merit to contemplating a one-state ride from Midtown to JFK? No. Or rather, there is one. There are several. They just only had Jamaica for the AirTrain. The AirTrain is not bad. Like the AirTrain has problems with frequency, but that's resolvable by running more trains. It's cheap because it's driverless. There's lots of traffic on the Van Wyck, actually, even very late at night. And there are plans to widen the Van Wyck for outrageous cost. I think it's like 1.4 or something, 1.5 for a short widening. Please don't do that. Please just improve transit service. Thank you very much. These ideas, maybe the subway could take over these tracks. I mean, look at the curvature on these tracks. Like, it's not. I don't think it's actually useful to try to run the subway here. It's people mostly thinking about one-seater. Yeah, getting to the terminal is nice, but not at any cost, or not at every cost. Sorry, what is the expression for it is valuable, but there are costs that are too high for it? Is it not at any cost or not at every cost? I mean the one that says that it could be valuable, but the cost may be too high, and I think it is, just because you would need to rebuild this. It would kind of clash with the internal circulation to the airport. So what, you'd just do an air train, so you'd have an internal air train, and then you'd have the subway only go to it, transfer to T1, T8? That's kind of weird. I mean, you can do it, but it's not like there's a dominant terminal in JFK the way at Frankfurt. Yeah, you take I don't remember if it's Terminal 1 and 2, the one that has Lufthansa, and there are actually 2 stops at Charles de Gaulle, of which one is T2, which is the Air France one. And the other is kind of for everything else. And it's not as good. And here there are a bunch of terminals. You probably would not do several terminals just because, again, you want the circulation space. Like, I mean, if it's a subway line, it would not be very frequent. I guess you could do 6-minute service there, but, I mean, from the city to the airport, you don't need 6 minutes. It's long enough, you need 10, 12. And then, especially if it's a branch of this, what is most commonly proposed, if it would be a branch of a branch, so yeah, it would be not every 6 but every 12, and that's again fine if you're only hitting the airport. In the same way that every 12 is fine if you're hitting the Rockaways because they're very far and very low ridership. But then internally to the airport you need much more. So it's not. So there's this kind of clash, and I don't think that telling people to change to Jamaica and Hard Beach is the end of the world. Why is air train frequency so bad anyway? I don't know, but I choose to blame Port Authority. Not at any cost. Okay, thank you. Thank you, the court. Sorry about my Alon does not know English. I'm sorry that my English is very non-native. I don't know the language. I don't know the language very well. I can to speak English, but not like an American. I'm sorry. I'm from Israel. Anyway, so anyway, thank you. Are there more questions? What's the lag? Do we really have an 18-second lag? Like, what? It's going to turn from me complaining about how old my computer is to how weird the connection is. I swear. Anyway, give it one more minute. I'm gonna give it like so much lag that I can give it even more time than that. My God. Anyway, I meant not at every cost. All right. Oh, thank you. I'm glad. I mean, I'm still using the same internet connection, except that now there's one more computer that's connected because my old computer is still on. But yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for bearing with me when I'm replacing the jank of my computer. Should have finished first grade by now with my computer as a newborn. And yeah, I'll see you again maybe this Saturday, maybe in a week. We will see on Topic DVD. Or even I could stream video games if people want, just as Alon plays a video game that they played on their old laptop a million times for the technically for the first time on a new computer. But we will see. So anyway, thank you, and ciao ciao. And if you and ask me on Discord or on social media if you want, if there's a specific topic that you want me to cover. I keep deciding these last minute because I'm not sure. But anyway, thanks, and see you, and ciao ciao.